Okay.
All right, well, we'll get things started. Assuming everybody's clicked the recording, they're okay with the recording. This is Dr. Mia Morgan. It's Mia Morgan White, correct?
Yes. Hi.
Yes. We'll do the full name. She's going to give us a presentation. Now, she is actually a 99, she's a 1%er. So, you know, I'm a measly little 2%er, just barely. So she's just way smarter than me. But I think this is going to be a great presentation. So I think we're a small enough group. If you have questions, just go ahead and unmute yourself and just say, I have a question. If we get a really big group, I think I might just have people stay muted and raise your hand so we can kind of keep chaos out of this. But right now it's a small group, so I think we're good with, if you have a question, just unmute yourself. I am going to mute myself. I'll have the chat open. If anybody wants to chat something, we can do that as well. And the floor is yours.
Okay. Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming. I'm not used to sitting down and doing talks. I'm used to being like on stages all around the world. And I have a whole life coaching series, and I do a lot of compliance review and profiling, but I've been a member of Mensa since I was a little kid. That's when I qualified. And I guess I would start with the story of how that happened. I was like Bart Simpson, and I would crack jokes in class, and then I'd have to write lines. And back then it was like 500 lines. And the way our brains work, I'd come up with systems to make it not as painful to write 500, I will not talk in class, or I will not crack jokes in class, because my teacher liked to make the sentence very long so it would be more painful, so that I would learn not to do it. Well, finally, I got called into the principal's office, and they were like, Mimi, why are you always writing lines? And I was like, because she never gives us any work. And they said, well, actually, the other kids need the time to do the work. And the fact that you're finishing it in 1 or 2 minutes is you, it's not her. And I said, you haven't even seen what she gives us. And so they had this 1-hour session, and they called my mother in to explain that it was me and the way that my brain processes information. And that's why I finished the work in 1 or 2 minutes. And I couldn't crack jokes to entertain myself, because it made the other kids laugh, but they didn't have time to do their work, which inspired me to learn how everyone learns and specialize in the brain and say, well, if we learn how the brain functions, then we can make life easier for each human being. So I started with things like mythology, and then I moved to comic books. So I reprogram people's brains. It's what I've done for a living pretty much my whole life. I was a school teacher by the time I was 21, because of the story I just told you. They said I could be anything I wanted. So when they called me into that meeting, it was like they were making a superhero. This means you can be whatever you want to be, and you can learn anything. And I spent all of my childhood in labs and on think tanks until I finally let them know I was going to be a school teacher, and they all had fits, because that's not the road they thought I was going to choose. And I became a master teacher while constantly learning how the brain and the subconscious affects behaviors. So I don't usually title my talks the long university, PhD, super brain level of what I'm hiding in the talk. So I will, like one time it was like fat girls love cake, because I wanted everyone to be like really upset with me of why would I say fat girls love cake? Because not all fat girls love cake. And the whole talk was about don't judge people. Right. And so that's why I named it that, because I wanted them to realize that. So with this talk, I want us to look at the way the subconscious gives us a short form of communication. And that now, right now, literally this year, in these last months, we are starting to have people use that subconscious shortcut language that's supposed to make life easier on us to be cruel or to make life harder on some people. So if I said there's a woman in a black suit who steals jewels, none of us even someone like in other languages for the past 50 years, the brain is owned by the fact that we know that that's Catwoman, or we know that Spidey doesn't have a cape, but Superman does. No matter what language we speak, no matter what social class, no matter what IQ level. But what I have noticed is that in the lower IQ levels, we're experiencing people taking their filters, which is the subconscious reality given to us. Okay, so I see the world as heroes and villains because I was raised in a town that uses the phrase, if someone's breaking the law, our town says, spit on the Constitution. That person spit on our Constitution because we don't like people breaking the law. And we were taught to defend the Constitution, defend the law. Well, we were also taught Wild West and comic books by our parents. So my dad would act like, you know, a cowboy having these in-depth philosophical conversations with his kid, but he didn't teach me anything else in the world except for Wild West values and how you function, which led also to be a hero. Then my mom was very staunch feminist. So she taught me pretty much to be like Wonder Woman. She taught me literally to be like a Valkyrie, and she pointed it out at the opera. So it's no surprise that I grew up as a profiler. But my family structure and my town structure, you always do what's right, which is why I do therapy for the victims and I reprogram their brains. So far, I'm able to reprogram up to 500 humans in small group where they get to talk and interact at once for whatever you want me to reprogram their brains for. If it's a blanket reprogramming, meaning up to like a conference where there's like 5,000 or 10,000 people, the largest I've done to reprogram in a blanket is 5,000. So I'd like to propose that it were anyone to challenge that the subconscious runs the show, but the subconscious also tells on us. It tells our beliefs that we try to pretend we don't carry out. So if I'm going to give some comparisons that the subconscious controls and then how it affects our behavior, because we tend to think we know what someone's doing based on our programming. So if we see someone, we think weight is attached to diet. So if we see someone overweight, we assume that is from diet, not from health, from diet. Like there's no fat superheroes. Okay, because we have a cultural bias towards that. But also when we see somebody by race, we assume social class. And some social classes assume intellect. When my friend named Biff, he's a trust fund baby, and he's not very bright. He's very sweet, but he was never very bright. But people assumed he was because he's very tall, very handsome, very blonde, very lovely blue eyes. But Biff is like a bump on a log, just really sweet bump on a log. And we grew up together. And so I just thought, if we work on our subconscious permissions, not our subconscious programming, because unless you get reprogrammed or you get life coaching, you don't even know what's in your subconscious. That's why it's subconscious. But our subconscious permissions is where we rely upon an agreed upon societal norm. So if you see someone wearing glasses, we think they have a greater intellect. But the shortcuts that are now being used is people are plugging in, which is why I wanted to do this series. I have a whole life coaching series in 4 different markets, but I wanted for us to look at how we look at heroes, not just the comic books, because if you notice, the comic book with heroes always do better than comic books that just have different worlds, unless they're an adventure. So if there is a quest or a journey, we like that because humans are bent towards the hero's journey. There's a mess, there's an awakening or a solution, and then there's success. So the hero's journey takes us through what we should do for clients as doctors and what we should do for each other as people. So we don't always know what's happening with someone's journey, right? So when we look at it, when I notice there are people where our judgment right, would say, oh, this is a bad character and that's a good character. So I'm sure there's people that like the Joker and like the Penguin, but by comic book standards and the fact that they took us and showed us this person is bad and they're always bad. It doesn't mean they don't have love in their life, because the Joker has Harley, but he does mistreat her most of the time, but he will kill for her to protect her because nobody gets to mistreat her but him. So then we got into what is the anti-villain. So now we've got the anti-hero in Batman. And then we've got villains that are vigilantes that are helping the world. Well, comic books weren't just made for our entertainment. They were made for our behavioral structure so that we adapt. And when we adapt to behaviors that are best for ourselves and the social norm to be kind. And right now, what I've been seeing is people literally using the worst of the filters to harm or lie on other people. So let's say it's a guy, because of a lot of movements that should have been happening on women's behalf for the last 600 years. Now, if a woman wants to lie on a good guy, all they have to do is say 2 key words. And then now that guy's a bad guy, and it could take him 10 or 20 years to prove that he didn't do any of those things, because our subconscious tells us this is the definition of a bad person. This is the definition of a good person. But comic books also give us aliens that we, extraterrestrial, interdimensional beings, extra dimensional beings, like all these different followings and techniques that are used now in different communities to describe this. Superman technically is an alien, but we still love him, and we accept that into our culture based on what he does for the planet. So it's a constant thing of he came to the planet to help the planet, and now look what he's doing for the planet. He's a hero. Now that brings us to our next thing. He's a hero until we experience the characters that envy him. And that's what's happening to our children and the young people right now, where they're using subconscious to lie and attack other people and hurt them, like bullying, like 8-year-olds on Facebook committing suicide on Facebook Live, and then other people writing in the comments, yeah, do it. So we had to pass a new law that says if you do that, that's murder. But we shouldn't have had that a behavior that was allowed, but that came out of the subconscious permissions of you're not seen, so you can say what you want to. Now, I would say raise your hand if you remember on the playground, if you say what you want to, you get in trouble. You say what you want to, you're going to get a spanking when you get home, or the bully's going to pop you in the mouth or something like that. So we learned you don't say cruel, mean things because you want to. And depending on where you grew up, like my grandparents taught me, my aunts and uncles taught me, if you think something that is cruel, something's wrong with you. Like you don't like yourself. So as I teach, I always say, people that like themselves don't feel good putting other people down. But here's what happens. Now you have all these stereotypes that exist in people's heads, and they don't have a concept of being a hero or a villain. They literally, I'm telling you as a doctor, we have developed 2 generations of people and social classes of people in 9 generations for the past 200 years now, where they can watch a hero and villain movie, come out with villainous behavior, and not attach it to being mean, evil, inappropriate, or cruel because of their social permissions. So they can see if someone's Christian and they're judging people for being non-Christian or being metaphysical, or right, they will say, oh, that person's evil because that person's not this, or that person's not what I am. But then be unkind, cruel, downright evil to other girls at church. And so I'm like, vibrationally, you feel like a witch. Vibrationally, you feel like the witch. You just judge for being an actual witch. And so what we're getting now is people not assigning vibrational, energetic feelings and consequences to the behaviors that they're displaying. So I need someone to read Samuel's question for me because it disappeared before I finished.
My apologies. If I may interject, ma'am?
Oh, go ahead. And my
Thank
eyes
you.
are
No, it was, so is this one of the consequences of the rise of the anti-hero concept in comics and in society in general, that, you know, you get these individuals who don't follow social norms and are still felt to be heroes? Like, you know.
You know what? And that's why I brought up the anti-hero and the anti-villain, because what's happening with the anti-hero, I thought that was it. And so I did the research, 12 years, almost 13 years, to see if that's what was happening, but it wasn't. It really, because I thought, oh, because we created the anti-hero, now people think they can be a hero. Remember that one series where like the heroes would have like beer bellies and stuff, and they would do stuff and then they'd go out and be heroes, right? It's not that. What I have found is it's these subconscious permissions that say, I am this, whatever good thing, right? The person tells themselves, and that's why I use the Christian and the witches, because I see it all the time and I just think it's so hilarious because I was raised in church. And so I don't understand how someone can see villainous behavior as not being a villain, nor are they trying to be a hero. So it's judgment. So if we wrote the equation on the board and act like this was physics of the human brain, the way it's affecting the body is the subconscious has an identity. And then the subconscious has a series of judgments. And the identity they have as a basic person, most people aren't trying to be heroes. You know, I was raised very oddly, but between my town and my parents, like my family and my town and our church, they never even taught me racism existed on the planet. Like I didn't know it was a thing. And they taught me so much of everything else, of all classic literature, math, science, planetary alignments. They taught me so much stuff I could never have figured out. They left some stuff out, but they did. Nothing that I would think about anyone or nothing anyone would ever think about me. They did not attach that part of the world into my subconscious or my life. So what's happening is these people see themselves as, I'm a good whatever. I'm a good Christian. I'm a good woman. I'm a good boy. I'm a good girl. I'm a good, right? Now we are being hit with people, they aren't boys or girls. They're fluid and they change every day. And that is more towards the gaming world that created that on a subconscious level. But the anti-hero is missing from their brain. They don't have the hero portion. The hero portion is missing. They're just pure anti with a high conscious opinion of themselves, of who they are. So they basically are able to say, I'm good, but I can do evil to this group. And then they do evil to that group. And the easiest way I like to explain that, because it took a lot of years of research and just watching hundreds of thousands of humans interact and then testing to see why the brain was doing this. If we think of before the internet was invented and how a small handful, right? And I'll put my hands up, small handful of people, usually about 5, ran a school of each gender. And everybody else was discounted and their books were knocked out of their hands and they were put in the garbage cans and they were abused, right? But that's because this was the quarterback and that was the prettiest girl, and right? But we gave those permissions to that group of people and we accepted it for 300 years. We accepted it. And then the internet was invented. And it was the people who invented the internet who had been the victim of that type of behavior. And they decided on a conscious level, we do have a purpose and we don't deserve that anymore. And so the behavior, they accept it, changed. And then that handful realized you're 5 people of each gender at a school. And now the problem is the bullies are the big population. So the alphas are not the handful. The alphas don't register anymore. Now it's the masses being bullies. They don't have the concept of being a hero. They think a hero is something that is made up, not something that is a series of behaviors. Like choosing to be kind. Being kind is a choice, but it's a choice that helps your personality. It helps you disappear the id, right? So you literally make the id disappear every time you choose to be kind over cruel, because you're choosing the betterment over the ego. Once you do that, it changes you vibrationally, and that's what makes a hero. And that's what comic books teach us, right? Comic books aren't there to just teach us to love aliens because they came here to make the planet better, right? It didn't just teach us, you know, the best cars and cool costumes and superpowers. Batman doesn't have any superpowers. Batman's superpower is doing what's right, backed by billions of dollars, but still doing what's right. Got it? And stopping what is wrong and stopping who is wrong. So because of that, we now have people that are vibrationally, right? So if we go hero, villain, high, low, light, dark, positive, negative, I'm trying to think of some other dualistics so that the brain can detach. I want people listening. I want your brain to detach from the judgments of positive, negative, light, dark, right? How does something feel when it comes towards you? How do little kids react? Babies, not these 5-year-olds doing stuff, but like infants. Infants light up when there's light and beauty, because that is a feeling that makes them less dense and makes the body heal and makes us happier as people. When it is very dense, that would be cruelty, unkindness, put downs, yelling, screaming, stuff that make us small or feel shrinking or sad is bad and cause blocks in our body, which actually leads to diseases. So unhappiness and depression are attached to the level of cruelty that's happening. And then people can't figure out why they're being hopeless, because they're also being unconscionably cruel, and their subconscious permissions are doing it. So now we have people in meetings holding up the meeting over pick your pronoun. I think if your pronoun is different, then you should have the right and be supported in your pronoun. Do I think 200 people have to declare their pronoun? No, I think the person whose pronoun is different should say, or in the meeting, make it clear. They don't have to be the one, but somebody make it clear how they are to be addressed so they are happiest. But to suck 200 people into having to declare that is causing problems on a conscious level because of the subconscious of what the heck are we doing? Why is this meeting this long? We could have cut out 25 minutes. But what they're not attaching it to is they put that 25 minutes where people announce their pronoun because all of the cruelty, hate, things on their locker, things on their desk of the person whose pronoun is different. So if we start to address the subconscious permissions for behavior, I see it in line all the time. I'll use clerks at the library, for example. I see clerks at our local library and their supervisor too, employ a certain behavior for 5 people in line. And that behavior shows they know how to act like a clerk. They bend their head down. They do all kind of little nuances to say, I'm here to serve you. It's my job. I do it with a smile and I joke, right? That kind of thing. Like, I don't want to feel like I'm beneath you, but I know that I am. So they're constantly doing little things. I don't mean the way that my eyes are lowered right now. My eyes, I have very big almond shaped eyes, and I'm looking at the camera, and it is because the phone is lower than my eye level. So I'm looking, going, okay, not that. It is when someone is functioning, right? So let's say James Bond walks into Moneypenny and Moneypenny is so excited to see Bond and Bond makes her blush. People, those kind of reactions where we meet somebody and they feel like our better. We like a crush, right? Or an admiration, or like Robin knows he's the sidekick to Batman, right? So because Robin knows he's Batman's sidekick, he doesn't act the way to Batman he would to someone else. Now, it's hard to use Robin for comparison because Robin's personality is he always acts like that towards everyone. He never acts like anyone's equal. He's always the younger, the sweeter, the kinder. He never acts equal. So where I live, the clerks never act equal. Unfortunately, they employ the, cowering. And then when there's someone in line that they've decided based on their judgment, they assume race equals social class or class. Like if someone poor is shopping or at the library in my neighborhood, they treat them less than they are. They treat them unkindly. So the same people that know how to act like clerks, so they're just not a bad clerk with a bad attitude, right? I literally will see where I'm trying to see Mario, like there's one, his name's Mario, and he literally will take the stance of, I'm Jefe, I'm king of the universe, right? When dealing with one set of people at the library, and then he will cower and act like, at your service, sir, right? But Alfred doesn't do that. Alfred knows his worth. Alfred never changes how he treats Batman, how he treats Robin. It's not a difference. Alfred has a job to do. He respects his job, and on a subconscious level, his job duty is what's important. So he doesn't carry a judgment that says, I can drop all these behaviors and be cruel or unkind to someone else. And so we're losing our concept of villain. Our concept of villain has become ingrained in people where they're kind of like Two-Faced. They literally, Two-Faced the character, not Two-Faced the Greek, betraying. So they literally are villainous humans doing unkind things as often as they can, pushing as much frustration and anger into other people's space, using a small intellect. Now, people, sometimes they get confused with IQ and intellect. It has to do with processing. So they do not process logic, and then they state it as fact. Like they will say, if I was, what did I do? Sometimes my intuition will be nagging at me for something I'm forgetting. You're forgetting your keys. You're forgetting this. You're forgetting that, right? Or remember to take an umbrella, like that kind of thing. They don't have that. They don't have a voice telling them what's right, what's wrong. They have a primal vision. In this world, they know a certain behavior will cost them. And then a different behavior that should cost them because of our agreed upon views, they think those behaviors towards certain things, or lie enough and it makes it the truth, or have enough people say something and that makes it a fact. So we have people literally lying opposite to physics. So we have people thinking the world is flat again. We have people committing crimes and then lying on the victim when physics disproves their lie because they're not processing. They don't even have the ability to process. But what they do have is the subconscious judgment that no one is going to listen to the customer they're mistreating or the person they're lying on. You see? So that type of behavior, we have made villains who don't know they're villains, and they have killed the concept of antihero because there's nothing heroic happening. There's cowards and there's cowardice and there's cowering, but there's no like sometimes I wonder if I should make a comic book about a surfer who's a hero, right? Because the subconscious of the surfers that I know, not every surfer ever, but I always say there's a difference between the surfer that made the trust fund and the surfer that gets the trust fund. And I have tons of friends that are trust fund babies, so I'm not even trying to talk bad about trust fund babies. It's back to the concept of the king that wins the kingdom over war is a different man than the king that is king because his grandfather was the king who won the war. That's a different person because they didn't go to war. They didn't use a sword. They didn't fight bloodshed. There's not betrayal. That it's a whole different person. So what we have produced is people who are villainous that think the permissions give them a permission to do unkind, evil things, and it doesn't make them a villain. That's so the problem with the brain is the brain switched. And because it thinks we have agreed upon permissions for their behavior, they no longer see themselves as a villain. And they have no desire to do anything heroic.
May I make an observation, Dr. Mia? My
Sure.
apologies. Thank you. Maybe this is just something I'm seeing and it's not, wider based, but I will note that as a huge comic book fan, as villains, both in the comic books and in the attached cinematic universes, as they're getting more complicated, as people are seeing certain villains as more relatable, like, you see the Thanos was right stuff on the internet all the time.
Right.
But while that's happening in the real world, people are treating other people on other ends of the political spectrum, other ends of a social spectrum, all the rest of that as more caricaturized villains. That it's like, person X is now, almost characterized like a Captain Planet villain where, they don't even look at them as human anymore. They're just,
right.
that person's terrible.
The trick on the title for this course, right, is it had to do with that. We are saying the same thing. That is what happened. They literally, so imagine someone basically saying, I'm going to be a villain and attack who we decided is the villain. The problem is that behavior came out of permissions to victimize certain people based on race, class, gender, sexual preference. And that grew vibrationally, that grew in these humans. So what you're saying and what I'm saying is the same thing. They are acting, they're monsterizing someone they don't agree with and saying that person is so awful, we can turn into like just raging, like they want to rip that person to shreds, as opposed to if you want to rip someone to shreds and you approach them like wild, crazy mob of zombies, you are the villain. So now we have two villains. So we have a bad guy and we have mob supervillain behavior. So now that's why we have people saying Thanos was right, because they don't have the subconscious attachment to compassion. They're starting to lose their vibration. So if you thought of is we're all like cups of white paint, and every time an unkindness, I don't know if you've ever worked with paint, but I'm a classically trained fine artist. And so I try to use paint to describe vibration because it helps us understand it more easily. You can add a lot of stuff to red and you're still going to get red. You'll get different types of red, but we're used to seeing different types of red. But if you add anything to white or anything to black paint, you never get white paint again, and you never get black paint again. The eye can't see it. The eye sees the color you changed it with. See? So what they're doing is we're all white paint. Like, so let's say there's 50 billion cans of white paint or buckets of white paint. Buckets works better because we can see in the bucket. Every time they add that behavior, where they say Thanos was right, then they added something that changes that paint, and they don't see the change until they are Thanos. Because if they had Thanos doing the stuff he did, especially the on-screen universe, right? Because the brain can register that when there's a picture attached, picture and language, the brain attaches to that and recalls it and incorporates it into your being. So the people saying Thanos was right, if Thanos was in their real, present, human 3D life, they would not say Thanos is right. But because they are pretty much so transformed vibrationally, they are a black or brown can of paint, because there's so much trash in there, so much hate, so much cruelty, so much judgment, so much right? Because once again, we go back to the comments that they're able to make. People, when they started being able to be the most unkind thing, we are who we are. When you are alone and the behavior that you do when no one's watching, that's who you really are. You see, that's who you really are. So if no one's watching and there's no recourse for your behavior, what's the worst and the best thing you would do? That's who you are, consciously and subconsciously. So what we have is a whole bunch of villainous behavior, a whole bunch of people who are villains. So now their measurement of what is wrong and right has changed. Okay, I had a friend of mine actually say to me once, after I did research on some sociopaths, he was like, I think you have cross-pollination. And I was like, what are you talking about? He said, no, I don't think you're a sociopath. I think you just understand them more now. So you don't see them as just evil, because I have this, Wild West view of there's only like heroes and villains. Like even as a child, my parents trained me so well. I decided that the cowards in the town were also villains because they helped the villains. So I've never been a person since I was like 5 who could understand being a coward wasn't helping unkindness, cruelty, crimes happen in the world, because there's one villain. But when the crowd becomes villainous, now that villain is small in comparison to the villain that the crowd has become. So that's what we're dealing with. We're dealing with crowds that think they decide right, wrong, life, death, putting, whether it's comments or trying to rip someone to shreds because they did something. Yes, maybe somebody committed a crime and maybe they're a complete villain. Maybe they're complete nut jobs. Maybe they're complete, right? The person they're attacking may be those things, but they're almost like, not like Wolverine. You know how Wolverine can't always control his behavior, but he tries to, and when he can't, he isolates himself until his powers that were forced upon him from what is in his body without his permission. These people have all this stuff in their body without their conscious permission. It went in on a subconscious permission, and now they're determining conscious behaviors. So that's why they've become such monsters. Yeah, it's like they're worse than the villain they're attacking. They're committing more horrors.
It feels like it's just in the real world, it's compounding.
Yes.
It's a further pendulum swing back and forth. And I'm not blaming, one side or the other side. I'm just saying that, because you're forcing the pendulum farther each time, it's becoming more extreme each time.
Yes.
And people are just losing the idea of, they stop inviting family members to Thanksgiving. I mean, you're like, no, it's the idea that because someone is on the other side of the political aisle, you don't have a conversation with them.
Right.
I don't want to discuss anything that's, kind of behind the firewall, but there was an online conversation yesterday among people related to this organization where it felt very much like someone hadn't been heard. Like this person who was very unhappy about some of the stuff in the news, they had certain concerns. And I'm not saying whether they were right, wrong, indifferent, but they simply didn't feel that they had been heard. And because they didn't feel they were heard by anyone, their anger just got higher and higher as they were discussing the thing in the news. And it just became, an emotional spiral. And that becomes very difficult and painful to deal with.
Exactly. That, and see, that's what I mean. Like, I'll
The
use
vibrational thing, yes.
light this time to explain it. People, sometimes they don't pay attention when I say who you are when no one around is who you really, really are. So if someone came and said, you can do anything you want, anything good, anything bad, no recourse, and you're empowered to do whatever good thing. So that person, when someone is not heard, anger is not the response to someone trying to be a bucket of light. Anger is the response to someone whose bucket is already full of darkness. So what I used to do is if I was giving a talk and the room was noisy, okay, and these talks were usually teenagers or itty bitties. To me, itty bitties are anyone like under 5, but more than 1, right? So I would whisper because my bucket is full of light. So my fallback, my subconscious, who I am when I'm not around. I mean, when no one is around, who I am when I'm not around is hilarious, but who I am when no one is around is I'm still a great person. I'm still a good person. I'm still a kind person. I say, excuse me when I'm home alone. You see, I don't look for a time where no one's looking so I can do things that are naughty or bad or full on evil. These people with the anger, that anger is not there from not being heard, not that day. That anger is there from a lifetime of gobbling up anger instead of forgiveness, or not standing ground because it wasn't safe, right? Like it's not safe. If look at a Wild West, look at any comic book. When the villain's coming, people run. Heroes stand up, heroes fight. But my take on it is we should all be heroes. So when that person starts pushing their anger, right, then they are the villain because now buckets of light are getting stuff thrown at him. When really, if you want to be heard, you don't yell. If you want to be heard, you stop and let whatever chaos, or if people are over talking, like I did this one time in a meeting. I teach meditation, although I grew up in a Christian church, and I consider myself very much still the way I was raised in church. But when I go to churches, I see some evil stuff, which is why I started telling. I just told a church woman this last week, her 4 friends that they feel like witches because they're so mean and they're so evil and they're so judgmental and so unkind. Now that doesn't, I have enough sense to know that's not every Christian woman, but I want Christian women to know that if you are full of anger and mean and unkind, you're evil and you're feeling like a dark bucket. You're feeling like the evil that they're hiding inside. So when someone hasn't been heard, I literally have had this work for 28 years of working in these markets. I whisper. Now, I've never had some place where I was hired as keynote or somebody's life coach, or I'm doing a seminar, or I'm doing a course. No, but there are groups of people where they don't always listening, right? They're not always listening. They don't always listen to what's being said. Sometimes I'll say it and then everybody acts like they didn't hear it or they're poo-poo it. And then somebody else will say the same thing I said. And then a few minutes later, they go, that's brilliant, to the other person because I was the only girl in the room. Other times I was the only person with a tan in the room and they had stuff attached to their subconscious that said my brain can't be better than their brain. So the idea has to be theirs, because if it's mine, it can't be good because I can't be smarter than they are, right? Because they think IQ and intellect has to do with smart. Smart is a slang. IQ and intellect have to do with processing. So the anger that that person expressed was anger, emotions that are already attached to their being. They are already a hot villain mess. And it comes out because it needs to overflow and it needs somewhere to spill. Because if you want to be heard, you stop talking and wait and see if the crowd notice you're not talking, or you whisper. I prefer whispering because what it does is I specialize in the brain. I'm not going to not talk because what if some people feel that's passive aggressive? So now we just get more anger in the room. So we don't let people's thoughts control our chosen behavior. And we need to be aware of what's happening in our subconscious so that consciously our behaviors are attributive to the world and making it a better place. So when I whisper, it is because I have specialized in the brain for so long. There are certain things the brain cannot ignore because of the fight and flight, because of the caveman, because you don't know if a dinosaur or a bobcat or a lion is coming after you, right? So biologically, the human brain can't ignore a whisper. It's impossible. It's biologically impossible because that's still built into us. Even though dinosaurs don't chase us down the street, nor do cougars or tigers or lions, right? A whisper biologically cannot be ignored by a human. That's why it amazes me when people think, you know, I have such a great tan that I could not possibly know more than they do about anything on the planet. And these are people who say things like, I'm so surprised it's hot right now. Somebody said that today. I'm so surprised it's hot right now. In the middle of October, why would it ever be hot? And I said, well, in California, we have Indian summer. It happens every year. It's always hot this time of year. That's why it's called Indian summer. You see, but they don't know the world. They don't know science. They don't know how the world functions. All they know is I have a tan, and therefore they must know more than I do. That kind of stuff we have to dismiss, or we change our bucket. I don't want to be a bucket of darkness. I like being a bucket of light and joy and goodness. Right? So when people misinterpret things I do and it turns in, all they do is tell me the stereotypes that were in their head. That behavior is not my behavior. The behavior, what you thought I was doing, or what you thought I did, or what you think you see is not it. And if you don't test it with logic or you don't ask me, you would never know. I'm quirky. I don't know how anybody would ever think they can watch me do anything and know what I am doing. Like, you know, based on filters, we know what someone's doing. Like I used to say, if a fat girl's walking down the street eating an ice cream, there are very few humans on the planet that don't think she doesn't need that ice cream. When I talk about compliance review, I don't use race. I use that story about that woman because I want the brain to understand she might need the calcium. Maybe she had a throat surgery. Maybe her doctor made her have ice cream. You see, like there's always other possibilities. I want us to get to a point where we realize as soul, there are other possibilities than what we have concluded. So when people turn to anger to yell, it is a trained behavior, or it is an abundance of anger that they need to spill, like a Scooby-Doo monster, you know, that electricity monster on Scooby-Doo, where every time you give it more electricity, it gets bigger. So they couldn't figure out how to beat the villain. I beat the villain by knowing the brain. So the brain can ignore a whisper. If a crowd was talking and over talking and everybody's giving their opinion, I was taught your opinion, your free will ends right here, right at the tip of your nose. So my opinion doesn't get to be in your world. My opinion shouldn't control your world because mine ends at the tip of my nose and yours ends at the tip of your nose. So we should be able to be friends and not argue because we see issues differently or we choose issues differently. but people aren't equipped in that way as long as we are allowing subconscious permissions making us into villains and not registering that. There's no way. Like when I told her, I was like, you guys feel like witches. I was like, that makes you a witch, because I know her whole thing is, I'm Christian and there's witches in this town and yoga is a witch, right? That's who this person is, but she's the meanest, evilest, mean girl ever. So she actually feels more evil than all of those people that she's judging as evil. Now, those people have, they have their own opinion of their own selves, but they also have decided, I choose evil and I'm making that public. I'll put it on the business card, So I'm not getting in a squabble with either of them. They both can be them and none of them get to transmute me. So we're talking about the transmutation of humans, and that these behaviors have transmuted them darker than they understand they are. So no, they shouldn't have overtalked the person. I think it's a woman that you were talking about. They shouldn't have overtalked that person. They shouldn't have made it so that person just felt like screaming and blowing their top was the only way to get their point made. But that person should not have that much anger built up in their space, even if you have to imagine it leaving you on a daily basis. People throw anger at people all the time. People in traffic, people walking down the street, people that just have too much anger, throw it at other people. People that are mad because you breathe, people that are mad because what? It's like, I drive an off-road vehicle. That makes a lot of people mad because they think I should live in a different neighborhood and have a bus pass. So there are literally people who have attacked me, who have attacked my truck. They just can't stand it. Like one girl said, what did she say? That's my dream car. And then she drew all over my truck with an orange marker, and my truck is black. You see?
If I can just make an interjection, Dr. Mia, in the particular case I was bringing up before, the group was not silencing the person who was unhappy. It was just this person brought unhappiness from outside into the group, and they were venting within the group. I think. Yeah. That's
the Scooby-Doo monster. So yeah. The Scooby-Doo monsters, that's why I was giving the example, because there's only a couple reasons. Like when you profile people, I've been a profiler for so long, the number one thing is it can always be another alternative, right? You don't hone in and go, because I know this, back to the 1500s on human behavior, back to caveman days on this, back to ancient Egypt and ancient Rome. I can profile and catch who you want me to catch. And I can show you why a person did what they did and how you can get them for it if you want to convict them, or who committed the crime when you have no idea who did it, like IT security. They don't know. I always say it's like, they call me in, there's a vase, there's water in the vase. They don't know what was in the vase or who took it. And I have to figure out both. But we can't do that when we have assumptions of what's right. So that's why you'll hear me state multiple things. So the anger monsters need somewhere to dump it. And any excuse to dump it happens. Or they only learned anger as a response. So patience is not a response. Some people, you know how some people are very vicious when you're having a conversation with them? They constantly make digs like at your personality or at your self-esteem, because they learned that as a form of communication. My mother used to call it nice nasty. So someone pretends to have a conversation with you when they don't like themselves and they're envious of you. So they make digs to try to make holes in you, literally vibrational, energetic holes, or they try to pick your life apart. So this person, you spotted her right. That's why I was saying and I call it the Scooby-Doo anger monster. I've been saying that since like 2000. I know it's not the way the Scooby-Doo monster operates in Scooby, but in the Scooby-Doo mystery series, what happens is this. I want people to know that when an anger monster comes at you, that monster was looking for a place to dump anger. So do not get angry, because that monster and that anger has achieved its goal. Not they don't deserve to be stopped, and not that they're not a monster. It is, see them for what they are. They are a vessel for anger. They are a vessel carrying a low vibration, hoping to lower your vibe too. They are a vessel carrying a low vibration, hoping, and this is the really scary part, which is why I named it the Scooby-Doo monster, because Scooby-Doos are always after monsters. Looking for a place to fill up with the anger that's in them. And as soon as they dump it and fill you with that anger or unforgiveness or fear, anything that's low, they fill right back up with the anger, because that's how they're made. And they're not transmuting, but they are going around transmuting other people.
If
So
I
that,
may ask, Dr. Mia,
sure,
my apologies again. This
never.
isn't the Q&A. As someone who was raised on comic books and, you know, grew up wanting to be Superman or Captain America, what I want to do is to help these friends of mine, you know, dissipate their anger and get back to a higher state of energy, to use your terminology, to be in a better place,
Oh,
from
that's
not
perfect.
being heard.
No, that's totally perfect. That's what I do. Why do you think I have these courses?
Yes.
Why do I do life coaching? Because you can transmute. You have to be like how I say, like Wonder Woman, right? Because my mom literally raised me to be an Amazon and Valkyrie. Now, I never wanted to be the Wonder Woman because I admire her so much that I think we can be like Diana, but each of us knows that Diana came from a village of women like her, right? So when you transmute them, you have to be the hero, knowing that a monster, the anger, has taken hold of your friend, and you slay the monster. But the most important part is knowing you cannot slay that monster with anger. You slay that monster by transmuting it. I would definitely never recommend being like the Grinch, right? So don't think you're gonna hug them enough, because I'm like, please, I am like a milk and cookies kid. I grew up like that. Like, can I go visit Miss So-and-so? And I sit there and listen to stories about 1940. So I'm such a Pollyanna. To this day, I still write letters by hand and seal them with wax and make little wax seals and collect them, right? Put ribbon. So I thought, yeah, my early years, I thought you can just love them to death. You can just love people and hug them and give them stickers and bake, right? And I cosplay, and I always will. And I write comic books, and I write self-help books and travel books. But one thing I know is certain monsters are only changed by slaying. And when you slay them with what transmutes. Okay, so every kind of monster, there's a different way to deal with that monster. And if these are your friends, and I hate when people have the clarifier of if, as if what you said is not true. So if always implies if what you're saying is true. So I try to always say, you know, I'm sorry, these people are your friends and you want to transmute them. The easiest way to transmute an anger monster is transmute them without talking to them about it. You cannot put enough love around an anger monster to make them switch, because they're just going to see it as like you're stupid. They literally, this is their words. They think being kind is stupid. So they're not going to see you as trying to help them. So what you do is you go after anger as if it's separate from your friend, because it technically is. Your friend is soul, and somewhere in there, in that pile of anger, in that whole bucket, your friend is in there. Your friend's soul is still present. So what you do instead is you constantly have them in environments where anger is not allowed. So you turn down the flame. Anger's not allowed here, right? Fairy princess, Princess Mia. That's right. I'm Princess Mia way more often than I refer to myself as Dr. Mia. I always said, I'm never going to be Dr. Mia. I'll be Dr. Morgan White, but I'm not going to be Dr. Mia. And then on my radio show, I was Dr. Mia every day. I had to be, because people always call me Dr. Mia and they call me, hi, Dr. Mia, right? So I'm very much Princess Mia. What you have to do is in your environment. Okay, so now I'm going to go deep in your home, in your thoughts, in your subconscious, and in your intention. Be unwavering light. And what you say is, I refuse to host darkness. I refuse. I refuse to let you come to my tea party. And therefore, my tea party is going to be so bright and cheerful that when you walk into it, it's going to change you. What does not match this bright and cheerful has to leave. And if you don't leave, I'm going to turn you into butterflies and flowers. And if need be, there's a Valkyrie sword just leaning against the wall. And I got a whole closet full of them. So if you want to play, then we slay. If you want to transmute, then wonderful. So you don't point it out to your friend, because your friend will deny it or become more angry. But your physical home environment, make it high vibrational as possible. Light, clean, and beautiful, because beauty transmutes. Then in your intention, no judgment, none. Not, I know why you have this anger. I wish you would give this up. The anger gets on my nerve. It's your childhood. Get over it. It's society. The world's all bad. You have to be clear of low vibrational thoughts. So you cannot even implore the thoughts that say the world is a bad place. Because if the world is a bad place, now your bucket's a different color and you're trying to transmute something, and it will be subconsciously agreeing with you. So what you do instead is you say, the world's a great place. My world's a great place. Your world's a great place. You just don't see that right now. And I destroy and uncreate anything I've ever thought that passed that judgment on to you. And I destroy anything in me that allows this anger to be present in my life. But I want my friend here. So you've got to go. So you now act like there is something like the Japanese. Do you read manga? Like, I love manga. So in manga, there's this concept of something like a cloudy or jello, something on the friend. And so in manga, you're able to see your friend is there and the yokai are there. And what you want is for the yokai to leave. So you be inhospitable to the conditions that they like. And then that friend changes. You see? And you have to be very strong in your conscious mind, because you're going to be reprogramming their subconscious. And of course, you can always contact me and I'll coach you through on a personalized set of words and behaviors and actions so that you're able to do that. Because I really am happy to hear that you're doing that for your friends. And it's not always easy. I have a friend that I used to call one of my uncles Grumpy Care Bear. And I have a friend that he's kind of like Eeyore. He's always like, the world is bad and it sucks, right? But because of that, I don't hang tight. I do my scuba diver thing. Okay, so when you're getting certified for scuba diving, it works like this. If someone is drowning, you have what's called an octopus, and you just move your arm and there's an extra hose that is to your tank that can give them air in case they've had some kind of emergency where they can't use their air. You're not going to just let your friend die. So you use the octopus and you swim over to your friend and you stick into their mouth, right? So they know you can calm down. You're gonna live. You can breathe. You can use my air, right? You put it in their mouth, and then in a panic, they usually fight you. And if they fight you enough, they will knock your tank off. They usually knock yours out of your mouth, but if they knock your tank off your back, then you're both going to be scrambling for air and most likely die. So if they're still in a panic and they do that, you literally do this, like moms when they're little, like, no, 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 no. Okay, so you do that and then you push off, right? You give them back that energy and you push off. You literally push them. And then you, at a distance, let them know, I'm coming to try again. I gave you that energy back because you're not going to put it here because we're not dying, we're living. And then you take that and you get the octopus again. It's only called octopus because it's what that a lot of people don't know if they're not a scuba diver. I'm a certified diver. The little black thing that you see swimming in the water behind divers, there's usually one or two. That is an extra tap into our air tank in case somebody needs it. So, and it's made the perfect length for every human's hand that we don't have to search for it. We don't have to dig for it. You stick your hand out, you swoop down, you swoop up, and it's in your hand. So you go back towards them again and you put it in their mouth and you keep them. But I have had dive masters come to me, and instead of bringing theirs to me, they literally bear hugged me and forced me to swim up. But they were strong men, taller than me, stronger than me, and knew that if they bear hugged me and took me up, we could talk. And underwater, you can't talk. So that's how friends feel. When they're trapped by anger, they are underwater and cannot hear you. What they hear is not what you said. What they hear is what the anger tells them you said. So you transmute them by being the most loving and kind and strong that you can be. So you're not strong to say, if you're angry, I won't hang around you. You're strong enough to say, I'm staying love and light, and I'm coming to get you, and I'm going to help you, and you're going to change. And everything that's on you that's not you has to leave. And you hold that stance, and what will happen is it will change. It will change. They will get tired. What's on them will get tired. The anger will come out of them. It will leave. So start planning things where they're in environments that change you, like watching dolphins. So not things that have aggression, and have things that make them remember before they were overtaken by anger. And if they had a childhood in which the anger seeded at that time, that means the anger is who they are in their minds, but they weren't born with that anger. So you just have to take longer, work harder, and you can get it out from childhood. I know because I was a doctor for survivors of incest, ritual abuse, and torture for 28 years. And 100% full recovery for all my clients. So it works, and it's not always easy, but it'll be easier on you than it is on them. It just won't seem like it, but they'll change, and it might be slow, but you just make sure that you hold steadfast that you're not changing your bucket, and don't get angry with them, and don't get impatient, but also don't let them be a parasite, meaning don't let them dump their anger in you. Okay, does that make sense?
Thank you, Dr. Mia. I'm sorry, I have some stuff happening. I have to drop out. I apologize. Love you guys.
Oh, that's okay. Thank you. Okay, so do we have anyone with any more questions, or do we want to get to the wrapping up part of when we are encountering people that don't have the healthy stereotypes as a part of their subconscious, so they don't have something to fall back on? They literally don't have behavioral examples that aren't.
This is a good wrap up point.
Sounds good.
Well, I want to thank you, Dr. Mia.
You're welcome.
Oh, this was great. This was great. Maybe you'll
I'm-
come back at some point.
Yes, if you wanted other topic, you can always suggest topics. Like maybe next time we'll just talk about fine art. Talk about sewing.
We look forward to, topics. It's Mensa, so we look forward to topics on just about anything. But which group are you in? San Diego Mensa or Glam, or where are you?
I'm in San Diego Mensa.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I was in Glam. It's so funny. This has to be with how just like quirky I am. So when I was in, where was I? 6 hours away or 7 hours away? I was living 6 or 7 hours away. I was in Glam.
Oh, okay.
And then I moved close to Glam, and now I'm in San Diego.
Well, welcome. When did you come into San Diego Mensa?
About a year
Oh,
or
okay,
a year and
cool.
a half.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah, because it's, you know what it is? It comes from being in Mensa. I read the rules, and the rules say I can join anyone. And so I went online and looked at different websites for different areas. So I was like in Yosemite and then in Marin, and the whole time I was in Glam, because I thought, oh, well, because of my industries and being in TV, and I never thought I'd be in radio, but I ended up being in radio because I tried to retire from TV. And then I left radio and went back to TV. So I write a lot of books, and it seemed like Glam's events would be fun whenever I was in LA for a conference. So that's why then I did Glam.
Okay.
I got to LA, I was like, you know what? My place is really like San Diego as far as socially. So I'm in San Diego more than I'm in LA proper.
Cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
No, that's
so
cool. So, and we're having, by the way, we're having the holiday party at our house this year. So if you're interested, check the Mensa when it comes to you, or check the Facebook group. But December 4th, put it on your calendar and we can meet in person.
I would love it. Yeah. It's like a 2-hour drive for me.
Oh,
So
okay. So you're living in the LA area.
yeah, that's
Okay. Okay.
great. It's
Yeah.
so great because once I moved here, then I was just like, well, my conferences are in San Diego. My clients were in San Diego. I was teaching a certain type of